Punch EV kakali electric kepada pemida ke Tata Motors ke bapaka bhabannya akin nong ba kum juru syakin nong kendong na maru battery UI hadu saus pa ar 2 km. Tada pikwa ban test drive ya ke kakali electric kila panuan ke showroom jong Frank Motors ke bahapo lat korbat hamau lain mau.
Tata.tv
Unong ilam kaliang persya Dr. Mukul sangma mentas ngiu lakam baka Sorkar MDA2 kala Pyndonkam daki Ktien Jelebi. Haka baidei bat ka jingshim ram bat kurukam Pyndonkam yaki pisa pilan jong ke jylla kenang baki Paidbah ken omsngotu yaki kam boitu ki jongki. Habakran mentakas ngi halo ka kaipot jong Comptroller and Auditor General of India na ka CAG. Dr. Mukul ulaong ba CAG ula wanra ya ka kaipot hadin bala bishar exmin bat puli benya bat judip yaki a baro kat kum kaan. Ulaong ba usngaw lengo kumno ka Sorkar ka padia pathar ya ka Ktien da ka batay bakla ya ka kaipot jong CAG arajar arpulai. Ulang ba ka Sorkar kala wanra da ki boit ban taplut ya ki jingshisha na ki Paidbah da ka ba wanra da ki Ktien ki baklan ki bam sngotu ki riumadan. Ulang ba ka ram ka ba ka Sorkar kala jubor bha na mar kala shimram ban siu ya ka ram kat ba ka jingmi pat kamdon bat long kumba bam hati kit kulai. Hagajing sisa ka Sorkar ka day bakanyat katkum ka Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management ne ka FRPM Act arhajar Henrio ka babatay pinya yaki rukom pinya yaki pisa pilan jong ka jylla. Dangshan umendi ramba u konrad ke sangma ulaong baka kaipot u CAG ka day hakaway ka benta namar baki shim yaki kam baka Sorkar kampat deb. Katkum ka jingong Dr. Mukul ka Sorkar jylla kala pelut tang 100% ya ka pisa ka bala shimram ban pentri kami ki projek katba ka basa syai ki bu bat syai ki pelut. Ulaong baha ka por ka Sorkar barim ka jong ka jingbo ya ka jingduna pisa ka long tang hapo lai persen. Henry gani ka Sorkar kala kiu sudo ka 1.r% ha u arajar arfuay pat ha u snem arajar arfulai kala pelut 100%. Katba ka ram ban siu pat kalong arfu pra persen kadjo ha boro kini kisnem.
This will be first independent probing agency. I will be visiting and I'll be going and seeing because data are available in the website. Let us go and see on the ground. I'll be embarking upon this journey very soon. I will request all of you, whoever can, be part of the team. Let us go. Let people know. Let the truth comes out. So the truth prevails. Because I know, you know, people know that this government will always be on denial mode. They are saying that our data are available. Data are available, yes. Based on that data only people are telling, na, ki kya hua hai, what is there, what is not there, which is not commensurating to the data which are available in the website. Accounts at a glance of the report. Please refer to page 11 and the last paragraph. Here you will see that out of the total borrowings of that particular year, only 44% has been spent, okay, for capital expenditure. Only 44%. That means the rest 56% has gone somewhere. Where has it gone? Where has that 56% of the total borrowing gone? Now you will see it in the report. The balance of the borrowing in the public debt was utilized to repay the principal and part of the interest on public debt of previous years. So you borrow and borrow, then you will shrink the space of the fund available for actual capital expenditure. And you will again enlarge the requirement to, to do good in respect of your repayment of the principal and also the interest of the burden of the borrowings. So this is the reflection of the state fiscal health. You are borrowing, that means whatever you are borrowing, as I have said, now if your EMI required to be paid is 75,000, you are earning 50,000, you are borrowing to ensure that you are not declared by the bank as a defaulter. But you are borrowing, you are further borrowing. You're further borrowing to service the repayment of both principal and interest. That is where the concern lies. That is where the government is lying to the people, that you're borrowing to pay the principal and interest, and you're increasing your borrowing, and you'll further increase your borrowing to repay the principal and repayment. I condemn this attitude. This is going to lead the state to a disastrous future, as has been honestly and truly reflected by the red flag given by the CAG. It's a red flag. There are many other things which I will not talk today. There are many other glaring irregularities which could not have happened unless there has been a complete patronage by the leadership in respect of misuse of fund by certain departments. That we will discuss some other time. I will not dilute it. I have given you an example which is reflected by the target set by themselves. When you are setting the target for fiscal deficit which is beyond 4, then your target set for debt GSDP ratio has to commensurate, and because there is a synergy between the two. You cannot have these figures in isolation. When you work out the total fiscal deficit, you also will automatically have its bearing on the debt GSDP ratio, because your borrowing will change the figure in respect of the debt and GSDP ratio. So you are setting only 28 as target, but your fiscal deficit is like this. How can you have the same debt GSDP ratio? That's why I'm saying that means they tried to camouflage it, but they didn't know how to do it.
So where does a layman go?
Now, that's why I will subscribe the idea of not allowing them to engage on jargon. They talk about sinking fund, this and that, and the repayment about the soft loan pertaining to the government grants and loans.
EAP.
Now, how do you manage to get the huge approval of various schemes where you have the support coming from World Bank, support coming from Asian Development Bank, support coming from JICA? How do you get? It is because of the fiscal health. It is because of the fiscal health that we maintain during our time. When you, as a banker, whom will I lend? I will lend to the borrower whom I trust.
Who can repay?
Who can repay? And whose, the whole financial transaction records of the past data is reflective of that capability. That's why you will have the states which will qualify and which will supersede other states while they take cognizance of various proposals. And that is how we got so much of schemes approved to be funded under Asian Development Bank, by the World Bank, by the different financial institutions. It is because of that we are strong in our financial fundamentals in our respect to our fiscal health. Now, you continue these. After 5 years, you go back to World Bank, you will be red flag. I have given you an example so that everybody will understand. I have given you an example by giving the figure. Total borrowing, out of the total borrowing for that particular fiscal year, out of that total borrowing, only 44% were used for capital expenditure. That means 56% is, out of the total borrowing, 56% was utilized to service the repayment of the principal and interest payment of the borrowing, earlier borrowing. So you will go on increasing this repayment by borrowing. That means to repay the principal amount and interest you are borrowing already. So where do you, how do you reconcile with the situation? If you want to get out of the debt trap, you will borrow more. So you will lead the state to a deeper and deeper debt trap. You will not be able to come out of the pit. Now, they may say that it is an instrument for every government to fund their developmental initiatives. Yes, that's why I'm saying. But look at how much of percentage of the total borrowing was spent for the capital expenditure. Only 44%. 56% has gone for repaying their loan. And it will go on increasing. I'm talking about that CAG report which was tabled in the recent. That means it is specific to 22-23. Now you will go again to 21-22. 21-22, you look at our overall growth in 2021 was less. Why? 1921 less because of the COVID pandemic. Now, since you have suddenly had a very low growth because of the pandemic, then as you recover, it looks high. But you are not calculating from the preceding years which were prior to the pandemic. You are calculating from the pandemic. Therefore, the figure looks very high. But in reality, you all know, only the wearer of the shoes knows where the shoe pinches. So the public know, you know, I know. Now another thing, this I want to add, though I am actually reluctant to add. I am reluctant to add because this particular, whatever we have today shared in my press briefing might get diluted. But please remember one thing. This is in spite of the fact that our share of tax revenue have gone up. Non-tax revenue have slumped, but tax revenue have gone up. Now tell me how the tax revenue have gone up. Every item that you buy, you pay GST. How do you pay GST? How is the GST calculated? Once it is in public domain, public have every right. That's why it is a public property. Anything that is laid on the table of the house, once it becomes the property of the house, it becomes the property of the people. It is not property of the member who is asking. Even when we sit questions in the assembly, once the reply is given, that reply becomes a property of the people. So all these are available. That's why I'm saying, I'm telling you there are few areas where which is a reflection of complete sense of impunity with which they are, engaging in this irregularity. It is reflective of complete sense of impunity, I repeat, with which they are following this whole modus operandi where you allow all these irregularities and fiscal indiscipline to become order of the day, which actually is a disorder. Therefore, as I said, with a serious concern that when you watch silently, then what is irregular will be seen as regular, and therefore people will think, oh, aise hota hai. It is not, my dear friends. What is wrong shall always remain wrong. What is irregular will always be irregular. What is illegal will always be illegal. But if you allow illegalities and irregularities to be, allowed to go on by the people in authority with complete impunity, then one day after maybe 10 years, 20 years, people will think that, okay, aisa hota hai. That is the challenge that we face. You work hard. Budgetary management, I have already told you, when there's such a huge irregularities and when their targets which are being set are not being achieved in respect of every fiscal year, then the natural growth of GSDP, which is not completely confined to what happens in the state. You understand? Which is not determined by whatever happens within the state, will always, you see, as a small state, very small state. But what is the strength of the state of Meghalaya? The strength of Meghalaya is that in spite of us being small, we have the privilege of being able to have access to a market of 1.4 billion population. That is our strength. That is our strength. So when the nation grows, when the other states grow, we are also beneficiary. We are also beneficiary. When the spending capacity of other neighboring states go up, you are also beneficiary. But at the same time, a word of caution. I have always subscribed to the idea of being an example to others, not just piggy right on somebody else's growth, and ultimately go back with a begging bowl to government of India, which is bound to happen the way things are happening. Okay? So, growth notwithstanding, which is not confined to the factors, which is not due to the factors confined to the state, but at the same time, what is the fiscal health? Don't go only by the total GDP of the country. Now, total GDP of the country, when you calculate, you will see which state is doing really wonderfully well. and which states are really contributing for the growth and the whole, the resources, the revenue which accrues to the government's exchequer. There are only few states. You need to be, we all should commend the whole contribution over the decades, post-independence. Few states. You look at Maharashtra, you look at, now of course not Andhra Pradesh, it is divided with the new statehood of Telangana. Then you have Tamil Nadu, you have Karnataka, you have Gujarat, 5 states. They contribute almost more than 50% of the total resources that is accrued to government exchequer in respect of Government of India's coffers. So, now you look at the debt burden, how many states are listed and where Meghalaya is. You just look at that. Then suddenly you will say, no, 2 other states are also like us. Need for adhering to the provisions of Meghalaya Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2006 or failure to adhere to this requirement. Now these fiscal targets, yes, this is the, I will refer to this page 13 of this our CAG report 1 of 2024, page 13, table 1.4. Okay, you can refer it again to have the detail. Now here you will see the projected targets for compliance with the provisions of FRBM Act 2006. In respect of fiscal deficit, let us confine to only this, because going beyond will again create unnecessary dilution of the main focus where I am going to actually stress. I will stress only on fiscal deficit and the outstanding liabilities vis-a-vis the GSDP ratio, or in other words, the debt GSDP ratio, which I have always referred to whenever I presented the budget and whenever I replied for the post-budget discussion. Now, you look at 2018 and 19 onwards, the fiscal deficit target set, because earlier during our time, before the amendment of the FRBM Act, there was an amendment. Subsequent amendment was resorted to by the present government also. And that is what I'm saying. They have amended certain portion in order to create these provisions for them to borrow more, borrow more. So they say that, oh, it is allowed, it is allowed. I'm telling you, both government of India have also, to a great extent, have not examined it properly and have agreed. That's why they piggy right on the government of India sometimes. But fiscal discipline is a fiscal discipline. If there is a deviation from fiscal discipline, it doesn't mean that only state government may be deviating from the fiscal discipline. It may be union government also who is also deviating from the fiscal discipline. Now, let us be really frank on this. Now, what is the target in 18-19 in respect of fiscal deficit? 3.25. Okay, what is the actual? 6.3. Huge deviation. Then if you go by 1920, it is target is 4.35. It has crossed 4. Whereas during our time it was 3. We never went beyond 3 in respect of the compliance that was required to be ensured by the government in sync with the Meghalaya FRBM Act 2006. Then you will see the revenue target for 2021 is 5.25. You cannot imagine from 3 you go to 4, then you go to 5. That is what I'm referring to as a modus operandi. Then you go down again after completing 5.25 target, you go down to 4 And that also, I have never seen it that it is not indicative of a set single target. It is 4-4.5. What is this? Then for 20 to 23, it is 4. Let us now get to the debt GSTP ratio. Now, if you are setting your fiscal deficit at 4 or 4, you need to also understand that this fiscal deficit will have naturally and automatically a bearing on the debt GSTP ratio. It cannot be calculated in isolation. It has, the influence over each other. If you are borrowing and your total asset is X, your debt and GSDP ratio will naturally change. So you look at when they have set the target of debt GSDP ratio at 28. Now it is 28 for 18-19, 28 for 19-20, 28 for 2021, 28 for 21-22. The target set for achieving this debt GSDP ratio, or otherwise the outstanding liabilities is to GSDP ratio, is fixed at same target 28, 28, 28, 28. But your fiscal deficit target is in variation. So this itself is a reflective of lack of comprehensive understanding and due diligence in respect of fiscal management. Again, you go again to the fiscal deficit. Who says that you cannot borrow? We say that yes, you can borrow. That is precisely what has been one of the way of as usual, the use instrument for funding government interventions in respect of development. But what is the purpose of borrowing? And where are you borrowing from? You may borrow from the Government of India, which is considered as a soft loan. Okay. Where Government of India give you lots of space to, maneuver, keeping in mind the constraints of the states. This is a collective responsibility that both union government and state government assume upon itself in really utilizing the resources within the command of both Government of India and the state governments. After all, it's like an arrangement between the parents and the children, something like that, So now here, you do not have only the parents who are lending you. You also have others who are lending you. Now tell me one thing, if you're borrowing, you have an EMI, you have to repay both the principal and the interest. So you will see in every budget, if you're looking at the budgetary projection and the actual expenditure in respect of 22-23, you see it. It's all in the table. The budgeted projection and the actuals. So you see there the repayment of principals and interests. Now, if you have borrowed from the bank, you have an EMI. Now you cannot pay this EMI because your earning is not enough. Now suppose you have to pay 75,000 and you are earning only 50,000. How will you pay that 75,000 EMI? So you again borrow. And you borrow to fund the borrowing and the repayment of principal and interest. This is what is happening here. You understand? This is exactly what is happening here. So borrowing and then borrowing to really repay the both principal and interest by increasing the space of borrowing. That is why the CAG has, in a nutshell, in a more simpler and respectful term, indicated its concern. And the government of the day has the audacity to hide from the truth and be on denial mode. This is condemnable. This is condemnable because we are all concerned about the future of the state. And obviously, when you talk about the future of the state, then you talk about the fiscal health. You don't expect your parents to borrow and borrow and borrow and leave behind the burden of debt upon you as children. That is not what the sensible parents do. So running the government is safe. Now, you look at out of the total borrowing. When you are borrowing, that means why we call it fiscal deficit. That is the amount which is just short, which you do good by borrowing. Now, why do you borrow? Any borrowing must be designed to be utilized for those areas of investment which will give you return, so that you are able to repay. That is the basic principle of fiscal borrowing, Therefore, in order to invest in capital expenditure, to create those assets which are capable of creating that kind of return over the years that you are able to repay. That is why when you borrow, you need to spend that borrowing for creating such infrastructure, such public assets which are capable of creating that enabling environment for you to be able to get fund which will accrue to the state exchequer, which you will do good for the repayment, both principal and interest. You understand? So that is how it is. Now, therefore, you have a borrowing from the open market. You have both negotiated from the financial institutions and also borrowing through, from this is regulated by RBI. So you have the bonds and other things. So there are a number of instruments for borrowing. But as I'm saying, do not actually club all together with the loan which is referred to as soft loan provided by Government of India. You have the figures. What is out of the total borrowing for that particular fiscal year? What is the actual amount which is the borrowing coming from Government of India? It is 1,000 plus. But the actual borrowing is more than that. So now what I'm trying to say is that, now you go to that another figure. Yeah, that is one part. And you looked at the debt GSDP ratio. Though the target is 28, I think I have not indicated what was the actual figure. The figure shoot up to 43%. The debt GSDP ratio reflected in the CAG report is 43, not 28. The target is 28. But has there been any sincere and honest attempt to maintain that target? No. And have they taken into cognizance where they have probably failed? They have not, because they are in denial mode. So denial mode means they already knew what was there. They don't want to take course correction. Meaning they do not have the intention to protect the interests of the people, interests of the state. Therefore, our concern is what type of burden you want to leave behind for the state, for the people, for the children, for the generation next. How are you going to service their repayment of the huge burden of repayment of both principal and interest because of their unlimited borrowing?